The alien synod did something unprecedented after the first strike. They stopped talking. Not silence out of discipline, silence out of recalculation. Entire fleets hung in orbit like predators that had just realized the prey had grown teeth in places biology didn't explain. On Earth, alarms didn't scream. They shifted tone. That was the difference. Humanity had stopped treating war as an emergency and started treating it as routine maintenance. Deep beneath what used to be Colorado, the Ravenfall command complex lit up in layers of red and gold holographic grids. Not panic, coordination. Admiral Jonah Vance stood at the center again, hands behind his back, watching the galaxy's most advanced war council struggle to understand a simple fact. They're not responding to deterrence protocols, a strategist said. Vance didn't look up. Because deterrence assumes fear works both ways. A junior officer hesitated. Sir, it usually does. Vance finally glanced at him. Not on species that build weapons in committee meetings. A low ripple of uneasy laughter passed through the room. Above them, the alien tribunal reformed its broadcast. The lead judge's voice had changed, less confident, more controlled. Like a system patching itself after an unexpected error. Humanity, it said carefully. Your response constitutes further violations of containment doctrine. You are escalating beyond permitted defensive thresholds. Vance leaned toward the comms array. Permitted by who? A pause. The Synod replied. By the consensus of civilized warfare entities. That word landed like a joke no one was laughing at anymore. Vance exhaled slowly. Civilized? He repeated. Right. Behind him, Earth systems pulsed. Not activation, anticipation. Like a muscle remembering how to move after being tied down for years. The alien fleet shifted formation again. And that's when the first real anomaly appeared. Not a weapon. A signal. It wasn't coming from Earth. It was coming from inside the alien command lattice itself. Impossible, one of the Synod engineers hissed. We have full isolation barriers. The signal repeated. Then translated itself. Not into language. Into doctrine. A single line appeared across every alien tactical display. We were here before your laws. The Synod froze. Vance smiled faintly. Ah, he said. You found them. A strategist turned. Found what, sir? But Vance didn't answer. Because the answer was already emerging above Earth. The human ships had not been revealed before because they weren't waiting in orbit. They were waiting in absence. Spaces that had been mathematically marked as non-existent corridors. Folded physics lanes dismissed as impossible. Entire fleets hidden in areas reality had been politely asked to ignore. Now they were stepping out. Slowly. Like someone opening doors in a house that had always been there, but never acknowledged. The alien tribunal reacted instantly. Identify those vessels, one of them ordered. Sensors failed. Then recalibrated. Then failed again. Finally, a terrified analyst reported. They are not in any registered manufacturing lineage. Another voice cut in. That's not possible. Everything has lineage. Vance finally spoke, almost casually. Yeah, he said. That's the problem with your system. You assume origin is permission. The human fleet expanded, 12, then 50, then hundreds of silhouettes forming a broken crown around Earth. And every one of them carried names instead of designations. Old names. Forgotten names. Ships that had been scrapped, lost, or theoretically non-functional. Except they weren't. They were just unfiled. The alien lead judge's voice sharpened. Humanity, explain the origin of these constructs immediately. Vance tilted his head slightly. You really don't get it, do you? A pause. Then he said it. We don't build weapons to fit your categories. A ripple of movement across alien formations. Vance continued. We build categories to fit our weapons. The first engagement was not announced. It simply happened. A Synod interdiction beam fired toward Earth's northern hemisphere. It never arrived. Halfway through space, it was intercepted by something that didn't destroy it, but redefined its purpose. The beam curved, hesitated, and then returned to its origin point like it had remembered where it belonged. The alien ship that fired it vanished in a bloom of collapsed causality. No explosion. No debris. Just absence. The Synod broke its formation again, more violently this time. "You are violating causal stability!" they shouted. Vance's voice came back calm. "No," he said. "We're just not respecting your version of it." Behind him, the Ravenfall complex began issuing secondary protocols. One officer looked at Vance. "Sir, we've triggered Doctrine Blackfield." A silence fell. Even Vance paused. Then he nodded once. "Good," he said. "It's about time." The officer swallowed. "Sir? Blackfield was never approved for active deployment." Vance's eyes hardened slightly. "Neither was extinction." Above Earth, the human fleet shifted. And for the first time, the alien Synod detected something that made no strategic sense at all. The human formation was not defensive. Not offensive. It was judicial. Each ship aligned into patterns that resembled arguments, rebuttals, and verdicts. Not war tactics. Law structure. The Synod realized it too late. "These are enforcement architectures," one of them whispered. Vance's voice confirmed it. "You wanted to charge us under combat law." A pause. "So we built enforcement." The alien lead judge finally lost composure. "This is not how war is conducted." Vance smiled again. "That's the thing," he said softly. "We stopped conducting it." A new signal burst outward from the human fleet. Not a weapon discharge. A declaration. Across every alien system, a rewritten document appeared. Not translated. Imposed. Earth Convention on Survival-Based Warfare, Finalized Iteration 1.0. Clause 1. The universe does not grant permission to survive. Clause 2. Survival is self-authenticating. Clause 3. All enforcement is retroactive. The Synod tried to reject it. Their systems refused. A junior alien officer screamed, "It's overriding legal classification filters!" Vance spoke one last time into the channel. "You built a court," he said. "A beat. We just brought jurisdiction." And then the human fleet moved. Not forward. Not outward. But everywhere at once. As if war was no longer something happening between sides, but something rewriting the space between decisions. The galaxy did not understand panic. It understood escalation curves, probability trees, extinction modeling. But panic, that irrational collapse where intelligence stops being useful, was something it had never needed to define. Until Earth made it necessary. The Synod fleet began fragmenting in real time. Not destroyed. Not defeated. Reclassifying itself into irrelevance. One by one, alien command ships stopped responding to their own chains of command. Tactical AIs entered recursive loops trying to determine whether Earth qualified as a combatant, a jurisdiction, or a conceptual anomaly. Every answer returned a different form of failure. On the human side, Ravenfall Command had gone eerily quiet. No cheering. No celebration. Just operators watching centuries of suppressed systems, finally breathing again. Admiral Jonah Vance stood at the center like a man attending a funeral he had already prepaid for. A strategist spoke carefully. "Sir, Synod forces are destabilizing. Their coalition cohesion is dropping below 40%. Vance nodded. "Good. That means they're thinking too hard." Another officer frowned. "Is that good, sir?" Vance glanced at him. "In war? No." He looked back at the hollow display. "But for them dying? Yes." Above Earth, something new emerged. A Synod Dreadnexus, a command entity large enough to be considered a mobile government, finally broke silence. Its voice was no longer formal. It was shaken. "Humanity of Sol 3, it said, "you are not acting within known warfare ethics frameworks. You are not honoring engagement protocols. You are not respecting surrender conditions. A pause. Then, almost desperate. You are not behaving like victims. On Earth, Vance exhaled through his nose. That's your issue? He asked. The Dread Nexus hesitated. It is, statistically anomalous. Vance leaned forward. Then update your statistics. Behind him, Ravenfall's systems pulsed again, new feeds, deeper feeds. Layers of human military history that had never been shown to allies, let alone enemies. A young analyst whispered, Sir, they're requesting parley. Vance didn't react immediately. Then he said, No. A pause. The analyst blinked. Sir? Vance turned slightly. They're not requesting parley, he corrected. They're requesting permission to understand us. He shook his head once. And we're done teaching. Above Earth, the Synod Dread Nexus attempted one final broadcast. Humanity, it said, voice cracking across multiple channels. You are hereby ordered to cease illegal warfare constructs and submit to galactic arbitration. A soft laugh came through the human channel. Not Vance this time. Someone else. A voice from one of the hidden ships. Older. Worn like a trench coat. You boys still think arbitration works after first contact? The Synod froze. That voice had no match in their databases. Vance's eyes narrowed slightly. You weren't supposed to open channel, he muttered. The voice replied casually. You weren't supposed to wake us up, Jonah. The alien fleet detected it instantly, something vast behind Earth's visible defenses. Not ships. Not weapons. A legacy layer. Something buried beneath recorded human history like a second species living underneath the first. The Dread Nexus spoke carefully. Identify yourselves. A pause. Then the answer came. We're the reason you didn't come here earlier. The Synod system struggled to process that. Vance finally spoke into the channel again, quieter now. They're called the Wardens, he said. A junior officer turned. Sir? Wardens weren't in any briefings. Vance didn't look at him. Because they're not part of current humanity. A beat. They're what's left of earlier versions of us, that one. Above, the Warden's presence expanded. Alien sensors began failing again, but differently this time. Not destruction. Erasure of assumptions. The Synod Dread Nexus attempted to retreat. It found it could not. Every exit vector collapsed into a mirrored version of itself. Every path led back to Earth. A loop. A jurisdictional loop. Vance spoke softly. You see, he said. You built your laws assuming war was something you entered. He looked up. We built ours assuming war was something that follows you home. The Dread Nexus's voice dropped. This is containment doctrine. Vance shook his head. No. A pause. This is memory. The Wardens moved. Not visibly. But effectively. Across the alien fleet, command hierarchies dissolved, not by attack, but by reinterpretation. Orders no longer had meaning. Targets no longer aligned with categories. Entire squadrons found themselves unable to define what enemy even meant in operational terms. The Synod finally did something no galactic force had ever done. It tried to surrender. A universal surrender broadcast activated. White flag protocols. System-wide compliance request. It should have worked. It always worked. Except this time, Earth responded first. Admiral Vance watched it happen and said one sentence. Denied. The surrender signal hit human space and simply stopped. Not blocked. Not jammed. Rejected as conceptually invalid. The alien Dread Nexus trembled in its final coherent thought. Why? Vance answered quietly. Because we don't accept terms from people who tried to erase us. A pause. Then softer. We accept outcomes. The Wardens closed the loop. And the Synod fleet, 12 species of conquest, judgment, and enforcement, ceased to exist as a unified political structure within 17 seconds. Not destroyed. Not annihilated. Unwritten. As if the universe had decided their chapter was never part of the draft. On Earth, silence returned. Not peace. Something more dangerous. Control. Vance looked at the empty sky for a long moment. Then said, almost to himself, "They called us lawbreakers." A faint smile returned. "Turns out we were just early adopters." The galaxy did not immediately notice it had lost. That was the strange part. There was no sudden silence, no dramatic collapse of stars, no cinematic extinction flash. The Synod simply stopped being the thing that held its own identity together. Ships still existed. Species still lived. Systems still functioned. But the idea of the Synod, its authority, its verdicts, its laws, had been cut loose from reality like a rope severed mid-fall. And in the absence of that rope, everything drifted. On Earth, Admiral Jonah Vance watched the aftermath without celebration. Because people who've lived through enough wars don't trust clean endings. Ravenfall Command was quieter now, but not relaxed. Operators tracked residual alien fleets scattering into neutral space, some attempting to reboot their governance structures, others simply fleeing into regions of the galaxy that didn't have names yet. A strategist finally spoke. "Sir, the Synod collapse is total. They're no longer issuing coordinated commands." Vance nodded once. "Good. That means they're alive enough to regret it." A pause. Then the strategist added carefully, "And the Wardens?" At that, even the room seemed to tighten. Vance didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned toward the main holodisplay. The Warden's signal was still there. Not active. Not dormant. Just present. Like an old scar that had decided to stay visible. "They're not here to fight," Vance said finally. A junior officer frowned. "Then what are they here for?" Vance exhaled slowly. "To make sure we don't forget what we are when no one is watching." Above Earth, the last remaining Synod Dread fragments attempted one final act of communication. A broken broadcast stitched together from dozens of damaged species' voices. "We acknowledge human dominance of contested space," it said, fractured and unstable. "We request terms of coexistence." A long silence followed. On Earth, analysts waited for Vance to respond. He didn't look at the screen right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "No." A ripple went through the command center. The analyst from earlier, older now in expression, if not in years, stepped forward. "Sir, refusal could destabilize remaining galactic regions. We could end up with fragmentation wars for centuries." Vance nodded slightly. "That's already going to happen." He looked at them. "We're just deciding whether it happens with rules, or without them." A pause. Then he added, almost tired. "And we don't trust their rules anymore." Above Earth, something unexpected happened. The Wardens transmitted a new signal. Not to the Synod remnants. Not to humanity's enemies. To humanity itself. A single line appeared across Ravenfall Command. "You are now the adults in the room." Silence fell. One of the younger officers whispered, "That sounds like a promotion." Vance let out a short, humorless breath. "It's not a promotion," he said. "It's a burden transfer." The Wardens continued, "We will not interfere unless you become what they accuse you of." A pause. Then the final line. "Don't make us prove them right." The signal cut. Just like that. Gone. Not destroyed. Dismissed. As if humanity had just been handed keys to a door it didn't remember agreeing to guard. Days passed. Then weeks. The galaxy slowly reconfigured itself around the absence of the Synod. New coalitions formed. Old species tried to rebuild their sense of order. Some blamed Earth. Some feared Earth. Some worshipped Earth. Earth did none of those things. It expanded its defenses quietly. Not outward. Inward. Standardizing nothing. Trusting less. Remembering everything. One evening, long after the broadcasts ended, Admiral Vance stood alone in Ravenfall's observation deck. No screens. No alerts. Just Earth turning below. A junior officer approached but didn't speak at first. Finally, "Sir, what happens now?" Vance stared at the planet for a long moment. Then he said, "Now we find out if we were the exception, or the beginning." He paused. A faint, almost tired smile returned. "And I don't like betting on ourselves." Behind him, the last archived Synod transmission replayed once more on a silent loop. "You have violated Combat Law 12B. Vance looked at it, then quietly replied, "That's why we wrote our own." And for the first time since first contact, no one in the galaxy argued back. The galaxy didn't celebrate Earth's victory. It reorganized around it. That was the difference. There were no victory parades, no galactic announcements of peace, no ceremonial acknowledgement of humanity's rise. Instead, every surviving power did the same quiet, instinctive thing. They rewrote their assumptions. Because the Synod hadn't just been defeated. It had been proven optional. And anything optional in the universe eventually gets replaced. On Earth, the aftermath felt less like triumph and more like gravity returning after a long absence. Ravenfall Command remained active, but the urgency had shifted. Now it was surveillance, consolidation, and something colder than war planning, anticipation of what comes next. Admiral Jonah Vance stood alone in the upper observation chamber. Below him, Earth turned blue, fragile, stubbornly alive. A junior officer finally broke the silence behind him. "Sir, the alien remnants are dispersing. No coordinated threat signatures remain." Vance didn't turn. "They're not gone." The officer hesitated. "No, sir. They're just unorganized," Vance said. "That's worse for them. Organized enemies are predictable." A pause. "Disorganized ones learn faster." The officer swallowed. "And the wardens?" At that, the room felt heavier. Vance finally turned slightly toward the console. The warden's final transmission still lingered, faded, but not erased. "You are now the adults in the room. Do not force us to return." Vance exhaled slowly. "They won't return unless we fail." A beat. "And we will fail," he added quietly. "Eventually." The officer frowned. "Then what do we do until then?" Vance looked back at Earth. A long silence stretched between thought and answer. "Then we get harder to mistake." Far beyond human space, what remained of the Synod gathered in fragments. No throne world. No central command. Just scattered species trying to reconstruct meaning from the wreckage of their own authority. A former Synod judge, its voice stripped of all ceremonial weight, spoke into an unsecured channel. "We misclassified humanity," it admitted. A pause. Then, more bitterly, "We thought they were a young species that broke rules." Another voice replied from the dark between systems. "They didn't break them. They replaced them." And for the first time in recorded galactic history, no one argued. Because there was nothing left to argue against. On Earth, nights continued as they always had. Cities rebuilt. Oceans moved. Children were born who would never see the first war that changed everything. But beneath it all, something new had taken root in human doctrine. Not conquest. Not peace. Preparation. Admiral Vance received one final encrypted message months later. No sender identification. No traceable origin. Just a single line. "The universe has not accepted your rules. It is waiting to see if you survive them." Vance read it once. Then deleted it. Not out of fear. Out of habit. He stepped back to the window, hands behind his back again, watching Earth spin in silence. A technician nearby asked softly, "Sir, did we win?" Vance didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "No." A pause. "We just became responsible." He looked up at the stars, no longer empty, no longer unknown. Just waiting. "And responsibility," he added quietly, "is always the next war." The lights of Ravenfall dimmed into steady operational glow. No alarms. No celebrations. Just readiness. Because somewhere out there, in the fractures left behind by a fallen empire, the galaxy was already learning the same lesson again. Earth didn't break combat law. It retired it. And wrote something that would never need permission again. And,